Life, it turns out, has a genuinely twisted sense of humor, and honestly, dear viewer, I am here for every second of it. While bloated $200 million. Studio machines like Mandalorian and Grogu are cratering at the box office with all the grace of a controlled demolition, and with Supergirl and Masters of the Universe already lining up to share the same fate. Something remarkable is quietly happening in the dark corners of cinema. A pair of scrappy, low-budget indie horror films, made by YouTubers, of all people, are somehow running the table right now. And I'll be honest with you, I am absolutely loving this. Obsession was a genuinely impressive supernatural horror experience. Sharp performances, a clever premise, and the kind of ending that lingers in your head long after the credits roll. But it's Backrooms that's setting the industry on fire right now, hauling in over $80 million in its opening weekend alone, with absolutely zero sign of slowing down. The film is based on the legendary internet creepypasta, and it was directed by 20-year-old YouTuber Kane Parsons, and yes, I had to stop and let that number sink in for a moment. I've got condiments in the back of my fridge older than this man. Backrooms is a genuinely fascinating cultural event, a case study in internet mythology, bleeding into mainstream entertainment and, frankly, giving it a sharp elbow to the ribs on the way in. But here's the real question, does it actually earn the hype? Or is this just another overhyped genre picture coasting on name recognition and nostalgia? Let's find out exactly what we're dealing with, shall we? The story drops us somewhere in the early 1990s, centering on a man named Clark, a divorced, functioning alcoholic, doing everything in his power to keep his struggling furniture store from completely falling apart. One night, while poking around the basement, trying to track down the source of some strange electrical interference, he stumbles through what should have been a solid wall, and suddenly, the world he knows ceases to exist. He's in the backrooms now. So what exactly are the backrooms? Picture an infinite, suffocating labyrinth. An endless sprawl of rooms and corridors stretching far beyond anything that should be architecturally possible. Every surface is coated in the same nauseating shade of yellow. Every ceiling hums under the same cold, flickering neon strip lights. Random furniture and forgotten objects are scattered throughout, as if someone tried to make it feel lived in and failed completely. This is a place where the rules of space and logic have quietly abandoned you. Where the concept of boundaries simply doesn't exist. Where you can walk for what feels like hours, days, even, and find nothing but more of the same suffocating, identical nothing stretching endlessly ahead of you. And as Clark begins to navigate this impossible place, the silence starts to feel less like emptiness, and more like something holding its breath. Because he's not alone in there. Not even close. Convinced he's stumbled onto something worth understanding, Clark does what any reasonable man would absolutely not do. He brings his 2 employees in on it, hands them a video camera, and decides they're going to document the whole thing. Methodically. Scientifically. Brilliantly. It does not go well. Then there's Mary, Clark's therapist, who receives a deeply unsettling message from him on her answering machine and, rather than doing the sensible thing and calling the police, drives straight to the store to investigate. And yes, before long, she too finds herself swallowed whole by the backrooms. Shocking. Truly. Nobody could have seen that coming. But what actually happens to Clark and the others once they're in there? What else is sharing that impossible space with them? And is there any way out at all, or is this just where the story ends? Now, here's where the film genuinely earns its reputation. And that's the atmosphere. Because the Backrooms creepypasta didn't become a cultural phenomenon by accident. At its core, it was always the quintessential liminal space. A setting that looks, on the surface, almost mundane, familiar furniture, recognizable objects, ordinary rooms, and yet radiates this deep, bone-level wrongness that you simply cannot shake. It's like having a perfectly pleasant conversation with someone and slowly realizing that something about them is just fundamentally off. You can't name it. You can't point to a single thing. And somehow, that is so much worse than if you could. The wrongness has no source. And that, more than any monster ever could, is what makes it truly disturbing. The film nails this feeling with remarkable precision. The backrooms themselves are rendered as this vast, disorienting network of corridors, chambers, and shifting levels that obey no architectural logic and offer no promise of an exit. Every surface the same color. Every light source identical. The sheer, suffocating uniformity of it all presses down on you like a weight you can't quite locate, claustrophobic. Not because the space is small, but because it is endless in exactly the same way, over and over again. And what makes it genuinely refreshing is what it chooses not to be. There are no dark, dripping basements here. No dense forests carved apart by a shaking flashlight beam. None of the tired visual shorthand that horror has been recycling for decades. Instead, the backrooms are strangely, almost aggressively normal-looking, bright, sterile, and utterly mundane on the surface. That's precisely what makes them so deeply unsettling. The fear they generate isn't loud or sudden. It's slow. It creeps in through the back of your mind and settles there quietly, like a cold draft from a room with no windows. It's the dawning, stomach-dropping realization that this place was never designed to be understood. And it doesn't want to be. It's the paranoia that begins to build the longer you're in there. The shadow of a figure disappearing just around the corner before you can focus on it. The sound of something moving, somewhere deeper in the maze. Getting closer, or moving away, you genuinely can't tell. And that uncertainty? That's where the real horror lives. Something at the very edge of your vision. There for just a fraction of a second, and then gone. You can't confirm what you saw. You can't dismiss it either. You just know, with every instinct you have, that something is in there with you. And full credit to the production design team. Because Backrooms was built almost entirely on real, practical sets. The CGI is reserved for the genuinely mind-bending sequences in the film's later chapters, and even then, it's used sparingly and with purpose. The result is something that looks and feels extraordinary. You're not watching actors perform in front of a green screen void. You're in there with them, feeling the same walls close in, breathing the same stale, humming air. It's the complete opposite of the hollow, weightless visual emptiness that passes for filmmaking in your average Marvel production. The film is also remarkably patient with itself. It doesn't rush. It lets the wrongness accumulate gradually, allows the tension to tighten one quiet room at a time, as Clark moves deeper into the maze, equally mesmerized and completely destabilized by everything he encounters. By profession, Clark is an architect. A man whose entire career is built on understanding how space works, how structures behave, how rooms relate to one another. And yet everything here dismantles that knowledge completely. The deeper he goes, the more obsessed he becomes, not with escaping, but with understanding. A logical mind throwing itself against something that exists entirely beyond logic. And the backrooms, slowly, methodically, take him apart for it. Mary grounds the film in a different way entirely. As his therapist, she's already been navigating the wreckage of his life, the divorce, the drinking, the depression, and his stubborn refusal to acknowledge his own role in any of it. She's the emotional anchor in a story that is constantly threatening to drift beyond all reason. As it turns out, Mary is carrying her own quiet burdens, and they connect to the very nature of the back rooms in ways that feel anything but coincidental. I also have to take a moment to acknowledge the two lead performances here, Shea Whigham and Renate Reinsve, and no, they do not exactly glide off the tongue. I'll give you that, both deliver work that genuinely elevates the material around them. Whigham is one of those actors who belongs in that rare category of performers who simply never phone it in, regardless of what the project is. He shows up, he commits completely, and he makes it count every single time. So it's genuinely satisfying to finally see him anchoring a film that is actually worthy of what he brings to the table. Now, I'll be upfront, I am by no means a deep scholar of Backrooms lore, the expanded universe of video games, fan wikis, and internet rabbit holes that have grown up around the original creepypasta. Not my area of expertise. But even from the outside, it's fairly clear that the filmmakers made some deliberate and significant creative departures from the source material, particularly around the nature of the creatures that inhabit the space, and what the environment itself is ultimately meant to symbolize. If you've ever lost yourself in something like Silent Hill 2, where the town, the fog, and the monsters all bend and reshape themselves to mirror the protagonist's inner trauma, then you already have a strong intuitive sense of what Backrooms is reaching for. It's using an impossible place to excavate something very real. Purists will almost certainly have strong feelings about those changes, and honestly, that's fair. But for someone like me, coming at this without years of lore embedded in my brain, I was more than content to simply surrender to the experience and let the film do its thing. Here's the thing about horror movies though. They have a notoriously difficult time sticking the landing. The third act is where build-up has to give way to payoff, where carefully cultivated tension has to cash its check. And that transition is where so many otherwise great films quietly lose their footing. Backrooms isn't entirely immune to this. The finale, for all the richly layered setup that precedes it, essentially reduces itself to a fairly straightforward chase sequence, protagonist versus monster, corridor after corridor. There's no additional layer of complexity beneath that. No final twist of the knife. And after everything the film had so patiently constructed, it lands as a mild but Genuine missed opportunity to push the conclusion. Somewhere more daring and unexpected. That said, step back and look at the bigger picture, and Backrooms alongside. Obsession represents something that genuinely matters right now. These are bold, creatively ambitious films built on strong ideas, efficient storytelling, and real artistic conviction. Not bloated production budgets and suffocating marketing campaigns. Engineered to manufacture enthusiasm. The audience energy surrounding these films isn't manufactured hype. It's something that's been quietly pressurizing for a decade, a deep, accumulated hunger for cinema that actually respects the people watching it, finally finding somewhere to go. If Hollywood refuses to feed that appetite, someone else will step up and do it for them. And clearly, someone already has. Absolutely love to see it. Anyway, that's everything from me today. Now get out of here.